In the mid-12th century, a child was born on the vast, windswept and unforgiving steppes of Mongolia. Legend says that when this baby was born, he clutched a clot of dark black blood tightly in his hand. Shamans interpreted this as one thing: this child will rule the world with blood and the sword. His father, Yasuge Bahadur, gave him the name of a captured Tatar chieftain, Temujin, meaning the blacksmith. Temujin was the son of a noble clan, but his fate changed tragically when he was only 9 years old. His father, Yasuge, was poisoned and killed by enemy Tatars. In the Mongolian steppes, loyalty is as threatening as the shadow of a sword. The moment his father died, the other leaders of the clan said, "Now that we have no leader to bring us food, why should we feed this widow and the orphans?" They left Temujin, his mother Hoelin, and his siblings in the middle of winter in the heart of nowhere. Temujin, once a prince, was now no different from a hunted animal. He and his family struggled to survive by eating mice, rats, and roots. Cold, hunger, and the constant fear of death hardened his character like steel. But the real breaking point wasn't hunger, but a power struggle. His half-brother, Bektar, as the eldest in the family, was stealing food and bullying Temujin. That day, Temujin learned the most brutal rule of the steppe: if you want to survive, eliminate the threat. Temujin, still in his teens, and his brother Kasar ambushed Bektar. Temujin drew his bow and without hesitation shot and killed his half-brother. Although his mother Hoelin shouted at him, "Why are you devouring each other when you have no friend but your own shadow?" Temujin had already embarked on an irreversible path. He had learned that compassion was a weakness and that strength was the only true thing. As he grew older, his charisma and intelligence began to attract people around him, but this rise attracted the attention of his old enemies. His father's old clan, the Taichiot, captured him. They put a heavy wooden yoke around his neck and held him captive like a dog. Everyone thought he would die there, his soul lost to the steppe winds. But Temujin managed to escape by striking a guard on the head with that wooden yoke one midnight. Hiding in the icy waters of the Onon River under the moonlight, he made a vow to himself: "I will never again kneel before anyone. Either everyone will bow to me, or they will all perish." The abandoned child of the steppe had died, and in his place, the seeds of the man who would shake the world had been sown. And the first thing he needed on this path was not an army he could trust, but a friend he could trust. That friend would be Jamukha.
Surviving on the steppe is an achievement, but rising to prominence is a miracle. Temujin had freed himself from the wooden yoke around his neck, but he was still a nobody. He had no army, no wealth, only his newly married wife Berta and a few loyal men. But fate was not tired of testing him. One morning, dust clouds appeared on the horizon. The Merkits, Temujin's father's old enemies, had come for revenge. Temujin escaped and saved his life, but he was forced to leave his wife Berta behind. The Merkits kidnapped Berta. There could be no greater shame for a Mongol man. But Temujin refused to live with the shame. He would get his wife back. For this, he needed power. He went to Togrul, the Karaid Khan, the most powerful man on the steppe. He was his father's old friend. But the real power lay with Jamukha, his childhood friend, his blood brother, his Anda. Jamukha was a noble leader, a shrewd strategist, and a charismatic prince. As children, Temujin and Jamukha had cut each other's hands, mixed their blood, and sworn to be brothers until death. Jamukha answered his brother's call. Togrul Khan, along with the combined army of Jamukha and Temujin, stormed the Merkit camp. Berta was rescued. The enemy was destroyed. After this victory, Temujin and Jamukha united their armies. They slept in the same tent, shared the same blanket. They were like two bodies, one soul. But there could not be two suns in the sky. Over time, a deep chasm opened between them. Jamukha defended the old tradition. Leadership is the right of the noble. He whose blood is noble rules. Temujin, however, held a revolutionary idea. Leadership should belong to those who deserve it. Whether a shepherd or a slave, whoever is loyal to me and does their job well will rise. This difference of opinion turned into a silent war. One day, during a migration, Jamukha stopped his horse and said to Temujin his famous enigmatic words, "Let us camp at the foot of the mountains, where our horsemen and shepherds will be comfortable. Let us camp by the river, where our hungry and our soldiers will be fed." Temujin received the message. Their paths diverged. That night, half of the army followed Temujin. Brotherhood ended, rivalry began. Years of civil war stained the steppe red. At first, Jamukha won. He even sent Temujin a terrible message by boiling his generals alive in cauldrons. But Temujin was a man who learned from defeat. He reorganized his army according to the decimal system. He abolished nobility and rewarded loyalty. Instead of killing enemy soldiers, he incorporated them into his army. This was unprecedented in the steppe. Finally, in 1204, at the Battle of Chakirmaut, Temujin decisively defeated Jamukha. Jamukha fled, but was captured by his own men and brought to Temujin. Those men who had betrayed him were expecting a reward. Temujin, however, declared, "He who betrays his own Khan will betray me too," and had them all executed. In the tent, the two former Andas faced each other for the last time. Temujin said, "Let us unite. Let us forget the past. You will be my right hand." Jamukha refused with a bitter smile. "If there are two suns in the sky, the world will wither and burn. You are now the rising sun. There is no place for me. I have only one request. Kill me without shedding my blood. Thus my soul will remain in the steppe, and I will protect you forever." Temujin, in tears, gave the order. Jamukha was killed nobly, his back broken, without shedding his blood. Having buried his greatest rival and dearest friend, Temujin was now unrivaled. Date: 1206. A great Kurultai, an assembly, was convened on the banks of the Onon River. All the Mongol tribes united under a 9-part white banner. Shamans prayed to the heavens, and a new title was bestowed upon Temujin. He was no longer just a clan chief. He was Genghis Khan, that is, the universal ruler, master of everything from ocean to ocean. Mongolia was united. But Genghis Khan's gaze was fixed on the colossal wall on the horizon, on China, the heart of civilization. The hungry wolves of the steppe were now going to hunt the dragon.
The year was 1211. At the Kurultai assembly in the smoke-filled steppe, Genghis Khan looked upon his newly united people. The Mongols had ceased fighting amongst themselves, but their swords needed to remain rust-free. This savage energy had to be channeled outwards. He set his sights south, on the heart of civilization, silk and gold, China. At that time, China was not a single empire. To the north, the powerful Jin Dynasty, Golden Dynasty, ruled, having for years humiliated the ancestors of the Mongols, pitted them against each other, and subjected them to tribute. The Jin emperor considered himself the son of heaven and regarded Genghis Khan as nothing more than a rebellious barbarian chieftain. When he sent an envoy demanding that Genghis kneel, Genghis Khan spat on the ground and rode south. The war had begun. But this was a battle between David and Goliath.
The Jin Empire had a population of over 50 million, a regular army of 600,000, seemingly impenetrable fortresses, and of course, the massive Great Wall of China. Genghis Khan, on the other hand, had only 100,000 mounted archers. They had neither catapults nor the ability to besiege fortresses. Everyone thought the Mongols would be destroyed by this wall. But Genghis Khan was not just a warrior, but a master of psychological warfare. Instead of directly attacking the Great Wall, he found its weak points. He used spies, bribed border guards. He crossed the so-called impenetrable wall as if it didn't exist. When the Mongol cavalry descended upon the Chinese plains, the Jin army was in shock. The first major encounter was at the Battle of Yehuling, Wild Fox Ridge. The Jin army was 5 times larger in number, but it was clumsy and arrogant. Genghis Khan and his best general, Jebe, lured them into a narrow mountain pass. The Jin army was routed by the Mongols' famous false retreat, Turan tactic. The empire's most elite units were destroyed that day. There were so many corpses that travelers who passed through the area years later wrote of seeing hills of bones. Next was the capital, Zhongdu, present-day Beijing. This was the world's largest and most fortified city. Its walls reached to the sky. It was impossible for the Mongols to take it. Horses couldn't climb the walls. Here, Genghis Khan changed his art of warfare. He said, "If we can't break down the wall, we'll starve those inside." He besieged the city. He cut off all entry and exit. The siege lasted for months. Food ran out inside. Chinese sources write that the people began to eat their horses first, then each other to survive, and that cannibalism broke out in the streets. Finally, in 1215, the gates of Zhongdu were opened. When the Mongols entered the city, they showed no mercy. The city was plundered and burned for a full month. Palaces, temples, and libraries were set ablaze. The smoke was so thick that the sun was not seen for days. The Jin emperor fled south. Genghis Khan had completely conquered northern China. He was no longer just a steppe chieftain. He was a conqueror who destroyed civilizations. His army had learned siege tactics, gunpowder, and catapults from Chinese engineers. The Mongols had become an unstoppable doomsday machine. While Genghis Khan was savoring his victory, news from the West would cause him to turn his attention entirely in another direction, the Islamic world, because someone had made the mistake of stepping on the tail of the sleeping dragon. The year was 1218. Genghis Khan had conquered northern China and, amidst the smoke of Beijing, had become the richest man in the world. He was no longer the impoverished child of the steppe. He was an emperor clad in silks, drinking wine from golden goblets. But Genghis Khan's gaze was fixed on the West, not for war, but for trade. He wanted to secure the Silk Road and forge friendship with his western neighbor. This neighbor was the Khwarezmian Empire, the superpower of the Islamic world at the time, ruled by Sultan Muhammad, nicknamed Alexander II. Genghis Khan wrote a friendly letter to the Sultan. "I am the Khan of the lands of the rising sun. You are the Sultan of the lands of the setting sun. Let us establish a path of friendship and trade between us." With this intention, he prepared the most magnificent trade caravan history had ever seen. 450 merchants, 500 camels, chests full of gold, silver, Chinese silk, and sable furs. This caravan carried not only goods, but also a message of peace. The caravan reached Otrar, a city on the border of the Khwarezmian Empire. However, the governor of Otrar, Inalchik, was a greedy and cunning man. Seeing such wealth, he became blinded by rage. He sent a false report to Sultan Muhammad claiming, "These are not merchants, they are Mongol spies." Following the Sultan's order to take the necessary action, Inalchik slaughtered the 450 merchants in the caravan one by one, seizing their goods. Only one camel driver managed to escape and deliver this terrible news to Genghis Khan. When Genghis Khan received the news, he did not go mad with rage. He showed surprising patience. "Perhaps the Sultan is unaware. Perhaps this is solely the governor's fault," he said. He gave diplomacy one last chance. He sent 3 envoys to Sultan Mohammed. His demand was simple: compensate me for my goods and hand over Governor Inalchik to me. Then our peace will continue. It was at that moment that Sultan Muhammad made the fatal mistake that would change world history. Arrogance had blinded him. He thought the Mongols were merely barbarians living in tents. Saying, "A barbarian cannot give me orders," he had Genghis Khan's envoy killed, giving his severed head to the other 2 envoys. He also forcibly shaved the beards of the other envoys, a humiliation worse than death for a Mongol man, and sent them back. By the time the envoys reached the Mongol headquarters, Genghis Khan's patience had run out. This was not just an insult, but an unforgivable crime according to Tengri's laws. An envoy was to be spared. Before leading his army, Genghis Khan climbed the sacred Mount Burkhan Khaldun. He removed his hat, hung his sash around his neck, a symbol of humility before God, and placed his forehead on the ground. For 3 days and 3 nights, he wept and pleaded with Tengri. When he descended the mountain on the 4th day, there were no tears in his eyes, only fire. He gave his generals a single order: prepare yourselves. We are going west, and we will leave no stone unturned, no head on shoulders behind us. Sultan Muhammad was having a nightmare in his sleep, but he thought it would pass when he woke up. However, what was coming upon him was not an army, but the wrath of God. The Mongols were coming to burn the entire Islamic world, starting from Atrar. Peace was over. The apocalypse had begun. The year was 1219. The heart of Asia began to tremble. It wasn't an earthquake. It was the sound of Genghis Khan's army of 200,000 men sworn to revenge. The Khwarezmian Empire was the superpower of its time. Its army was larger than the Mongols, its cities richer, and its fortresses impregnable. Sultan Muhammad thought of the Mongols as mere plundering barbarians and believed they would melt away before the city walls. But Genghis Khan was coming not just with an army, but with a doomsday strategy. The first target was Otrar, where the betrayal began. Governor Inalchik, that greedy man who plundered the caravan and killed the envoys, defended the city for 5 months, but the Mongols' hatred was stronger than the walls. When the city fell, not a stone was left standing. Genghis Khan had Governor Inalchik captured alive. According to legend, making a reference to his greed, he said, "Since you love silver and gold so much, here is your wealth." He said this and executed the governor by pouring molten silver into his eyes and ears. The first act of revenge had ended, but the real shock came in Bukhara. Sultan Muhammad had divided his army into cities and established a defensive line. He thought the Mongols could not cross the Kizilkum Desert, that impassable sea of death. Genghis Khan did the impossible. While leaving a part of his army in Otrar with his sons, he crossed the desert with his most elite troops and appeared behind Bukhara, unexpectedly. When the people of Bukhara woke up in the morning, they saw Mongol banners on the horizon. The city was besieged and fell in a short time. Genghis Khan entered the great mosque of Bukhara on his horse. He climbed onto the pulpit and looked at the people and nobles trembling with fear. There he delivered the most terrifying, most chilling speech in history. "I am the punishment of God, the flail of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." Bukhara was burned. Libraries, those millennia-old repositories of knowledge, were turned into stables for Mongol horses. Pages of the Quran were trampled under the hooves of horses. Next was the capital, Samarkand. Samarkand, which Sultan Muhammad had declared impregnable, defended by 100,000 soldiers, could only withstand the Mongols' psychological warfare for 5 days. The Mongols drove captured civilians against the walls as human shields. Defenders were forced to shoot arrows at their own people. When the city fell, 30,000 Turkmen soldiers surrendered, and Genghis Khan said he would add them to his army. But that night, he put them all to the sword. Those who betrayed would betray again. The most brutal moment of the war occurred in Urgench. The city resisted so fiercely that Genghis Khan's grandson was killed in battle. The Mongols went mad with rage. They were not content with taking the city. They changed the course of the Amudarya River that flowed through it. They destroyed the dams and diverted the river to flow over the city. Urgench was submerged and erased from the map. Historians write that more than 1 million people died in this city alone. What had become of the once proud Sultan Muhammad? The master of that vast army was now a fugitive. His generals, Jebe and Subutai, whom Genghis Khan called his hunting dogs, pursued him relentlessly. The Sultan, having lost his treasury, his family, and his honor, took refuge on a deserted island in the Caspian Sea. He died of hunger and misery without even a shroud to cover him. The golden age of the Islamic world had been crushed under the hooves of Mongol horses. Cities were reduced to ashes, rivers flowed with blood. But Genghis Khan would not stop. The Sultan may have died, but his son Jalaluddin was still alive, and the Mongol army wanted to see the limits of the world. They had their eyes set westward, to lands they had never known, Russia and Europe.
The year was 1221. Sultan Muhammad had died of hunger and misery on that desolate island in the Caspian Sea. Revenge had been taken. Genghis Khan was preparing to return east to Mongolia with his main army, but his 2 best generals, Jebe and Subutai, nicknamed the War Dogs, stood before him. Their eyes held an insatiable fire. "Allow us, my Khan," they said. "Let us go and see what lies beyond the setting sun. Let us ride to the edge of the world." Genghis Khan gave them only 20,000 horsemen. This would not be an invading army, but the greatest and bloodiest exploratory expedition in history. Their mission was simple: go north, circumnavigate the Caspian Sea, and return. Crush everyone who stands in your way. Jebe and Subutai swept westward like the wind. First, they reached the foothills of the Caucasus Mountains. They encountered Georgia, one of the most powerful Christian kingdoms of the time. The Georgian knights, with their heavy armor and crusader banners, thought themselves invincible. Subutai gave them their first lesson in Mongol warfare: the feigned retreat. The Mongols fled as if frightened. The Georgian knights, shouting, "Cowards are fleeing!" disrupted their formation and pursued them. But in the valley where they were lured into a trap, those frightened Mongols suddenly turned their horses around and a rain of arrows began. The Georgian army was destroyed that day. Even the king himself barely escaped. The path was clear. The Mongols crossed the Caucasus and entered the steppes of present-day Ukraine and southern Russia, that is, the lands of the Kipchak, Cuman Turks. When the Kipchaks realized they could not stop these foreigners from hell, they ran north to the Russian principalities. They pleaded with the Russian princes, "They slaughtered us today, they will slaughter you tomorrow. Let us unite." The Russians took the danger seriously. The Prince of Kiev, the Prince of Galicia, and other great princes united for the first time in their history. They assembled a massive Russian Kipchak army of approximately 80,000 men. Opposing them were only 20,000 weary Mongol horsemen. Victory seemed certain. Date: May 31st, 1223. Location: Kalka River. Upon seeing the Mongols, the Russian army attacked. Subutai played his usual game again. He retreated. But this time, he retreated not for an hour, but for 9 days. The Russians, intoxicated by victory, pursued them. Their armies stretched for miles. Their discipline broke. Their horses grew weary. At the end of the 9th day, Subutai stopped on the banks of the Kalka River. He raised his banners and gave his famous order, "Return and finish." Those 20,000 fleeing Mongols suddenly returned with perfect discipline. The Russian army was stunned. Arrows darkened the sky. The heavily armored Russian soldiers were clumsy and easily defeated by the Mongol maneuvers. As the Kipchaks fled, they crushed their own allies, the Russians. The river flowed blood red. 90% of the 80,000-strong Russian coalition army was destroyed that day. The Prince of Kiev surrendered. At the end of the battle, Subutai held one of the most horrific feasts in history to celebrate his victory. He laid the captured Russian princes on the ground. He had enormous wooden planks placed on top of them, and while the Mongol generals ate and danced on those planks, the princes underneath perished horribly, their bones breaking and suffocating from lack of air. This was Russia's first encounter with the Mongols, and this fear would be etched into the Russian genes. Jebe and Subutai had completed their mission. In 3 years, they had traveled 8,000 kilometers, defeated countless armies, and circumnavigated the Caspian Sea. The report they brought back to Genghis Khan was simple. The West is rich, scattered, and weak. One day we can return and take it all. But that one day wouldn't come anytime soon, because Genghis Khan was about to breathe his last.
The year was 1226. Genghis Khan had devastated the Islamic world, become the sole ruler of the Silk Road, and returned east to his homeland, Mongolia. He was now in his 60s. His hair had turned gray, his face marked by years and wars. But the fire within him had not been extinguished. In fact, it had blazed even brighter. One score remained unsettled. Years earlier, while embarking on his campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire, Genghis Khan had requested troops from his vassal Tangut kingdom, Western Shia. The Tanguts, however, had arrogantly refused, saying, "If you cannot fight your own wars, do not be Khan," and had rebelled. Genghis Khan had not forgotten this insult. "I will settle this score before I die," he said. The old wolf took command of his army for the last time. This was not a conquest, but a punitive campaign. Tangut cities fell one by one. But in the freezing cold of winter, fate dealt Genghis Khan his final blow. During a hunt, his horse was startled, and Genghis Khan fell hard to the ground. He suffered severe internal bleeding and fractures. His generals and sons begged him to stop the campaign and return to recover. Despite writhing in pain, Genghis Khan refused. "If we return now, the Tanguts will think we are afraid. If I am to die, I will die on my horse, looking into the eyes of my enemy." Even from his sickbed, he commanded battles. When the Tangut king agreed to surrender, Genghis Khan gave his final order: "Let them not think I am dead. When the king comes before me, destroy him and all his descendants. Wipe the Tangut people from the face of the earth." And so it was. The Tangut kingdom was erased from the pages of history. Date, August 1227. Genghis Khan was about to breathe his last in his tent. His sons and loyal generals were around him. He was leaving them not a will, but an empire. "My life was short," he said, "but my work is far from over. I have conquered the world, but the rule is left to you. Be united, be like a fist, not like the fingers of a hand. If you are divided, you will all perish." And that great conqueror closed his eyes in a simple tent in the middle of the steppe. But the real story began after his death. The Mongols feared that their enemies would revolt upon learning of the Khan's death. Therefore, his death was kept a state secret. Genghis Khan's body was taken to his birthplace, the sacred Burkhan Khaldun mountain.
This funeral procession was the bloodiest march in history. The soldiers killed every living thing they encountered along the way. Human, bird, insect, it didn't matter. No one should see the Khan's death. No one should spread this secret. Along the way, thousands of people were slaughtered simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. When the funeral procession reached the mountain, Genghis Khan was buried in an unmarked tomb. Legend says that to ensure the tomb's location could never be found, soldiers rode 1,000 horses over it for days, leveling the ground. Some sources even claim that a riverbed was diverted to flow over the tomb. Then, 2,000 soldiers who dug up the tomb and knew its location were killed by another unit. Those who killed the soldiers were then killed as well. The secret was sealed in blood. Even today, despite modern technology, satellites, and archaeologists, Genghis Khan's tomb remains undiscovered. He came from nothing, shook the world, and vanished back into nothingness. All that remained was a name and an unfinished legacy.
After Genghis Khan's death, the world breathed a sigh of relief. Throughout history, all nomadic empires, Huns, Scythians, Göktürks, had been destroyed by power struggles the moment their founders died. Everyone expected the Mongols to meet the same fate. However, before his death, Genghis Khan bequeathed to his sons not only land, but also an iron-willed law, Yasa-i-Genghis. His sons remained faithful to their father's will. The Kurultai assembly convened, and Genghis's most intelligent and diplomatic son, Ögedei, was elected Great Khan. Ögedei, like his father, not only conquered but also built. He had a massive capital built in the middle of the steppe, in a windy valley, Karakorum. Ambassadors, merchants, priests, and craftsmen from all over the world met in this city. The empire accelerated rather than slowed down. Genghis Khan's war dog, Subutai, despite his old age, marched west one last time. Between 1237 and 1240, he completely conquered Russia in the middle of winter using frozen rivers as highways. Kiev was burned. Then he entered Europe. He destroyed the kingdoms of Poland and Hungary simultaneously in the battles of Linitz and Mohi, just 2 days apart. European knights were helpless against Mongol tactics. If Ögedei Khan had not died suddenly and the Mongol army had not had to return to choose a new Khan, historians believe that today Mongol flags would be flying in Paris and London. In the east, his grandson Kublai Khan completely conquered China and established the Yuan dynasty. In the west, another grandson, Hulagu Khan, entered Baghdad in 1258. He destroyed the 500-year-old Abbasid Caliphate. The library of Baghdad, House of Wisdom, was burned, and the Tigris River flowed the color of ink and blood for days. The intellectual heart of the Islamic world had ceased to exist. However, from this devastation, a strange order emerged: Pax Mongolica, Mongol peace. The Mongols controlled such a vast area, from the Pacific Ocean to Hungary, that for the first time in history, the Silk Road was under a single administration. A merchant could travel from China to the Black Sea with a tray of gold without being robbed. Thanks to this security, East and West truly met for the first time. Chinese inventions such as gunpowder, the compass, printing, paper money, and pasta flowed into Europe. Travelers like Marco Polo traversed these routes. Unwittingly, the Mongols sowed the seeds of the Renaissance. Globalization had begun. But, like every empire, this giant was crushed under its own weight. The territories were so vast that governing from a single center became impossible. Mongol princes assimilated into Chinese, Muslim, or Christian cultures and turned against each other. The empire was divided into 4 parts. 1. Golden Horde, Russia, Islamized. 2. Ilkhanate, Iran, Middle East, Islamized.
3. Chagatai Khanate, Central Asia, Turkified. 4. Yuan Dynasty, China, Buddhistized. By the 15th century, that great unity had disintegrated. When the plague epidemic, Black Death, came via the Silk Road and decimated the population, Mongol power also eroded. But Genghis Khan's legacy was not erased. He changed the genetic map of the world. Today, 1 in every 200 men in Asia is descended from him. He removed borders, and he taught us this bitter truth. No matter how strong civilizations may seem, a determined will from the steppe can destroy them all in a single night. The wind of the steppe has subsided, but its story will echo forever.